Hi everybody, welcome back to IndyCar on the 23rd of April 2019. I'm Gordon Ross. In the news today, we have Nicola Sturgeon, who has requested that the normal business of Holyrood be suspended tomorrow, it's Wednesday afternoon, so that she can update Holyrood and the Parliament there on the effects that Brexit will have on Scotland and its economy. Now, as well as making announcements about Brexit, it's been widely anticipated that the First Minister will also clarify her views on the path towards independence while she's talking tomorrow. And at the moment, I believe she's still waiting for the OK from the Holyrood authorities that it's OK to change the order of business in order to make this statement. And I think, given the gravity of what's contained in this statement, it's probably vital that Holyrood does change the order of business for tomorrow. Most of the independence movement, as we're all aware, has been arguing and bickering amongst itself about whether the SNP is dithering and whether Nicola really needs to start making some comments about what is going to happen. And with the SNP conference about to occur next weekend, I think now is probably the time when she's going to start making some comments and statements. So I think what's anticipated at the moment is that she's going to compare and contrast what will happen during the Brexit process, how that is going to badly affect Scotland, with how independence would do the opposite. It's a case of having a carrot and a stick approach to this. And to be honest with you, it's very easy for somebody to be negative constantly about something like Brexit and just constantly go on about how bad Brexit is. But actually people want to know how good independence is going to be, and the things that were missing from the 2014 white paper, those big glaring gaps, things like the currency that we would use, how we would do business with the European Union, whether we would rejoin the European Union, whether there would be a queen afterwards, you know, all of these questions that largely remained unanswered during the 2014 referendum, or if they were answered, were quickly shot down by the opposite side because we had no way of providing concrete evidence of what would happen after independence. So I think I'm speculating here like everybody else, but I would imagine Nicola is going to come out and first of all explain how the ongoing behemoth that is Brexit, which has rumbled on for nearly 3 and a bit years now, how it will finally play out, or if it plays out. But even if it doesn't play out and we don't leave the EU, the amount of damage that Brexit has already done, not only to British politics, but to the Scottish economy, the British economy, our international standing with trading partners around the world, and people's views of the United Kingdom generally. Now, there's a lot of things that she can say on that, which would, I think, provide a terrific contrast to what you could do under independence. And so I would expect that she'll begin with the Brexit process, what's happening at the moment, how that will affect Scotland's economic performance, how it will affect jobs, how it will affect investment and prices and the value of the pound and so on. And then she'll probably go on to explain how the SNP now has a plan in place, a viable plan which has been costed, in which all of these major questions are now being answered. And the primary ones of these big questions are going to be decided at the SNP Spring Conference, where they will table the motions on the things like the currency, how long we hang on to British currency before we change over, and so on. All these things are going to be done and debated, and the clear answers to these questions will shortly become available. So I'm hoping, like everybody else, that Nicola is going to pour oil on troubled waters, calm the troops, and get everybody refocused on what happens next. I think, to be honest with you, I think we all feel the same way, that she couldn't really wait any longer. I mean, the Spring Conference was always going to be the time when big decisions were made, but to be honest with you, I think the SNP has only just managed to scrape through this period up to their conference intact, without the independence movement in general fragmenting. It is beginning to fray at the edges. People are beginning to disagree with one another. People are beginning to accuse one another of being divisive. At this point, there has to be action, because anything can set off divisions just now. Anything at all. And I include myself in that. I was rash enough the other day to ask anybody if they would vote for me as an MEP and how you would go about doing that. And I was really being kind of flippant, but I was also being a bit frustrated. I'm not really going to stand as an MEP, but instantly people thought I was being divisive and I was going to undermine the SNP. Just to clarify, I'm not running as an MEP, but I'm just frustrated at the thought that Farage's new party, the Brexit party, seems to be more popular than either the Tories or the Labour Party in London. And I'm even more worried than ever that we're going to get even more idiotic MEP candidates than the one I've currently got in David Coburn. So frustration took over. However, anyway, to get back to the subject, Nicola's clarification or speech, whatever it takes tomorrow, whatever form it takes, is probably going to be one of the more important speeches or addresses that she makes to Parliament this year, before the spring conference. I think it's going to be a bit of a coat trailer. There are going to be teasers, there's going to be some spoilers in there about what's going to be talked about at the SNP conference. But the main message is going to be Brexit is going to be doom and gloom, and independence is the light at the end of the tunnel. It's the other option. This time, as I've said many times before, independence is now the safe option. Brexit is now the leap in the dark. We've got, and this is the ironic thing about this, we have two independence movements happening at the same time. You've got England wanting to be independent from Europe, and you've Scotland wanting to be independent of England. One has not provoked the other, but the two are linked together. But, and this is important, Brexit and independence are not tied to the same timescales, for the simple reason that independence is not predicated on Brexit happening. Independence is predicated on the fact that it needs to happen anyway, for its own sake. It's a bit like saying the Raj shouldn't have ended in India, you know, when clearly it needed to happen, and clearly Scotland needs to be independent. There's absolutely no reason for us still to be trapped in a relationship with England where we get nothing and England gets everything, where we have no power and England has all the power. That's not it's not a union. It's not a union of equals either. It's just simply domination of one country by another. It's the exploitation of a colony by another country. Which brings me actually just to a side issue just between this and the next story. People write to me all the time with interesting factual information. One of the interesting pieces of factual information that somebody dug up recently was they were looking at the oil revenue figures for the UK, and they seemed incredibly low, almost nothing, which, considering the amount of oil that's being pumped out of the North Sea, puzzled this particular researcher. So we went in deeper into it, had a look at the amount of money which was paid in petroleum tax. This is a tax which is made on every barrel of oil that's distilled into petrol, diesel, whatever other fractions. And then there was corporation tax. So this person has looked at both of those things and discovered that since George Osborne cut the rate of petroleum tax first from 50% to 35%, and then from 35% to zero, no petroleum tax at all, and then we'll look at corporation tax. Corporation tax is not being charged either, or if it is, it's being charged at very tiny rates. So the UK is virtually giving Scotland's oil away at the moment to the oil companies. Scotland sees no revenue whatsoever when, if you take, say, Norway as a comparator, Norway is currently pumping, or was pumping, about the same amount of oil, but was making billions, 40 billion pounds a year in taxation from it. It's now probably double that because they've doubled their output. Scotland and England, by comparison, it was 1.9 billion. That's, you know, that's 20 times less for the same amount of oil that Norway was putting out. So why is that? Why is England giving Scottish oil away to petrol companies like Royal Dutch Shell and BP? And I think the answer to that is obvious. It's very obvious that the whole of the British government must be in the pocket of the petrol industry, because there's no other explanation for why the chancellors of the Exchequer, and I use the phrase in the plural sense, George Osborne is long gone. He never redressed this balance. The current Chancellor of the Exchequer, who is it this week? Is it Jeremy Hunt? Can't remember. But anyway, whoever's got the job this week in the Tory party is still not raised the taxation on oil from zero. They're continuing to allow the oil companies to remove Scotland's oil for nothing. And that makes me angry. Still to this day makes me angry. But anyway, to cut back to the chase, Nicola is going to make the case for independence tomorrow. And she's going to trail her coat and give us a few tasters and teasers of what is going to come out of the weekend's debates at the SNP Spring Conference. And I'm hoping that is going to be a positive picture. I can't see how it could be anything other than that. Okay, now to end today's show, I wanted to report on something quite remarkable. The University of the Highlands and Islands, which most of us probably kind of imagine as being some kind of amorphous thing where there are university campuses dotted around in various rural complexes around the Highlands and Islands. Well, it is kind of like that, but the University of the Highlands and Islands has just developed something quite remarkable. It is a drone, for want of a better word. It is an aircraft which is remotely piloted or maybe autonomous, so it can be a robot. But this is the first aircraft I've ever heard of, and I've worked in the aviation industry for a long time. The first aircraft I've ever heard of which has no engine and yet can provide its own forward propulsion without engines. And it does this by a fascinating technique. If you imagine a whale that dives under the sea. Now, a whale is an air-breathing mammal, so it has to flap its fins quite hard to get down to the bottom of the ocean, at which point it then would start to come back to the surface. And this new drone uses a similar technique, only in the air. It uses buoyancy. And buoyancy, I mean, like in an airship, which is filled with helium. So this looks like a very fat little aeroplane with little short stubby wings and a little tailplane and little rudders on it. And the idea of this machine is that in order to go upwards and forwards, it simply pumps helium into its envelope, into its central body. And so it begins to rise. As it begins to rise, most people don't realise this, but any aircraft with wings, if it has neutral buoyancy, once it starts rising, it actually glides forward. And as it glides forward, it builds up speed, so as it climbs, it begins to go forwards. Conversely, if you want the plane to continue to go forwards, you can also use weight. Now, something which is lighter than air is basically full of helium. The helium is lighter than air, and as it expands, it displaces the air and it causes the machine to go upwards. If you then pump the helium out of the envelope and replace it with air, which is heavier, then the aircraft begins to descend. So it becomes a glider and it starts to move forwards because gravity is pulling it down. So you end up basically with a plane that swims through the air like a dolphin. And it's a fascinating idea. It's never ever been done before. Little solar panels on the wings of this aeroplane. And by the way, it is an aeroplane. It's a sort of cross between an airship and an aeroplane. Inside this machine are little pumps that pump the helium into the envelope or pump the helium out of the envelope and replace it with air. So it's actually breathing in and out all of the time. And as it breathes helium in, it goes up. As it breathes helium out, it descends. And by doing this, it can move around. It doesn't need propellers or jet engines or anything else, just these little pumps, and they're powered by solar cells along the top of each wing. It is a brilliant idea, and it means that instead of putting a very expensive satellite up into orbit to maintain things like cell phone connections, you can put one of these little devices up and have it just swim around in a circle above the cell area that you want to serve. And you can provide satellite television, telephone links, data links, all kinds of things which would be impossible without launching an expensive satellite. And not only can this aircraft do that, it can keep doing that forever until it wears out or until they want to bring it down to be serviced. It's a brilliant idea. And the curious thing about it, the first time I saw this, is I thought it would be perfect for exploring Mars as well, strangely enough, because one of the most difficult things to do on Mars is to fly. But if you have a dirigible ship like this, which can make itself both either lighter or heavier than the surrounding atmosphere, it could swim through the atmosphere of Mars just as well as it could on the Earth. So it has many applications, and it's just part of what I was talking about recently when I said that Scotland is one of the most inventive countries in the world. And we have world-class universities in the Highlands and Islands that just proved that this week by a world first, the first ever aeroplane without an engine, without propellers, without a jet. It's an amazing idea. And I'd like to finish the show on that high note, because I think this is the future for Scotland. This kind of development will make Scotland's fortune in the future. We are the country that designed the 20th century. We created everything. We created electronics. We worked out the difference between magnetism and electricity and the connections between them. It was our scientists and our inventors who invented television, radar, the telephone, scanners, you name it, Wellington boots, tarmac roads. We virtually invented the entire modern age. And now that that age of, shall we say, consumption and oil burning and fossil fuel burning is coming to an end, we're now in the ideal position to launch the next paradigm, the shift from that dirty form of energy to clean energy. And that clean energy will be two things. It will be renewable electricity from tide, sun and wind, and it will be hydrogen, which is being converted using those energies when they're not being used by households, into hydrogen to power things like car engines, to power anything that would find it difficult to run on electricity. We can even use it as a heating gas. All completely climate friendly. Nothing that would cause any heating to the environment or would be toxic to animal life anywhere. And we're at the cutting edge of that now. And if Nicola Sturgeon does what she should be doing this week and leading the way politically towards becoming independent of the backward-facing, oil-burning, wasteful UK, and we move ahead with our own plans, then we'll be the ones who are creating this new world, the world that youngsters like Greta Thunberg, who's leading largely by accident, but is actually leading the climate fight at the moment, this 16-year-old girl from Sweden. This is what will help her and her generation to stop the damage that we've done and that our parents have done to the environment in the past centuries. So I see independence linked to all of this. I've always been a person who sees the bigger picture, not just independence for its own sake. We have to look at the future for everyone, and everyone at the moment includes children. It also includes elderly people as well. We're all just as enthusiastic about this, but we can't do any of it while we're tied to the dead weight of a dying British Empire. Anyway, I'll leave you with the happy thoughts of Scottish aeroplanes that swim through the air as a final visual metaphor for what Scotland is going to become. We're going to be swimming away in a nice clean environment, away from the dirty past that the British government has locked itself into. And I'll be glad to leave it. I'll see you all later. Have a great day. Bye bye for now.